My name is Matt Osment. I work for a company called Rapid5D. We are consultants in the construction industry, particularly with contractors, and we work with Trimble Solutions, which is the same company that Stuart works for, but we work in a different sector. So we more work with the contractors and the 4D and the 5D and getting the job to site from the design. My next surprise was slightly ruined by the crazy PowerPoint thing. But the first thing I'm going to talk about is music, because the big thing I want to talk about today is data in construction. We are terrible with data, and contractors are potentially, and I say this knowing there's a couple of contractors in the room, are the worst. The reason I say that is because BIM has leapfrogged the contractor. It's gone from designers providing COBie data all the way to lifecycle management, and it's skipped out the bit where we actually build the thing and how we use that data properly. So yeah, first of all, I'm going to talk about music. I'm going to talk about Frank Sinatra, and I'm going to talk about his album A Swingin' Affair. And the first 3 songs on this album all have information about the songs. So they all have the album, obviously the artist, Frank Sinatra. They've got the length. They've even got the lyricist, the composer, and there's about 50 more columns of information that each one of these songs has. And each one of those, all of that information is stored in a database, and it relates to that ISRC code on the right. And that ISRC code is unique to every song. Every single song in the music industry has an ISRC code. And it is formed of a country code, a registrant code, which is, say, the record label or the individual artist, the year it was recorded, and then a unique designation code. It looks a lot like how we number drawings in construction, and everything makes sense. So at a glance, I can figure out where this was recorded, when it was recorded, and if I knew anything about the industry, I could find out who recorded it. So now, in practice, what that means is, if I want to create a compilation album of Rat Pack songs, what I don't have to do is go and find each individual song, find its album title, find its composer, find its lyricist. What I do is, I type the ISRC code in, and everything else just falls into place. And it is the exact same information. It is no different from the original information. So I want to find Sammy Davis Jr. as well. And then the third song, we're going to do it a bit more like we do it in construction, because I know I want a Dean Martin song, and I know I want That's Amore, but I didn't know the code. But from that, I can figure out the code, and then the code brings everything else in. So it's all about using what we know to figure out everything we don't know, and trying to do it as efficiently as possible. That extends to something a bit more modern in Spotify, which is, if I'm listening to a song, and I hit share, and I send that link to someone else, that link is actually formed from a hex sort of decryption of the ISRC code. And that link, my friend can open that up. I haven't lost the song. I can still play the song, and he can play the exact same song as me and find out all the information about the song, and no one is any worse off than before. So, how does that relate to construction? I hear you all scream in terror. The first thing I'm going to talk about is elemental breakdowns. Typically in construction, and I'm sure you've all seen it, we use SMM7 bills, we do SESM bills, we do whatever bills we want, and that tends to work from the building. Maybe we split it into substructure, maybe we split it into buildings, and it will start to say, okay, how much formwork have I got in the building? How much block work have I got in the building? How many bricks have I got in the building? So all that sort of stuff. What we say from a BIM point of view and a data structure point of view is, scrap that. What I need to do is look at the elements, and I need to look at the, let's say, the columns, and I need to build my cost up from the elements rather than sort of discrete construction terms or construction formalities like formwork. So let's take one of those columns. So I've got a column, and inside that column we all know we've got rebar, concrete formwork, we've got some cladding to the outside, and every single one of those things has another aspect associated to it, which is labour, plant, material, and a subcontractor. The reason we like to break costs down like this is because it aligns to the BIM output, because whoever modelled this thing didn't model formwork, they didn't model rebar, they modelled a column. So really everything I do should relate to that column. And then if they model 2 columns, all I do is just multiply it by 2. It's easy, and then if I go to another project, all I have to do is go, well, I've used those columns before, I'm going to pick that up. Also, easier to isolate costs. We all know clients, maybe they actually, often they ask for SMM7 bills, but they don't really know how to read them. What they want to know is how much things cost. They want to know how much their doors cost. They want to know how much their substructure costs. They want to know how much their superstructure costs. And also change management. And then the big thing highlighted in blue is it's reusable. and I'll get into that in a bit. The first thing is, how can we use the new rules of measurement from the RICS to facilitate this? So, new rules of measurement, is anyone familiar with new rules of measurement? Okay, so new rules of measurement is my favourite thing that no one seems to use. But so the way we start out is we say, right, what's the thing? What is this thing that I've found? So I found a concrete column, and it's 700 by 750. There could be 50 of them on my project. It doesn't matter, they're all the same concrete column. That then sits under a category of concrete columns, which itself sits under concrete frames. Then frame, then superstructure. So at any point I can roll this up and find out what my cost is all the way up that chain. And to see what that looks like when I start to add more things in, I've got a different type of column, maybe I've got some beams, and I've got a couple of different types of beams.
Sorry, is this part of the unit class?
No, it's separate. Yep, it's more cost driven. And it's a method of measurement rather than a classification code. Because and that was just what I was about to get onto. No, it's a good segue there. So the great thing, the best thing about NRM, which Uniclass and nothing else does, is it is a form of measurement. And I know I have to measure columns in height, and I know I have to measure beams in length. And that is the key to this data structure, because if I had one guy who measured his beams in volume, one guy who measured them in surface area of the beam, and another guy who measured them in length, I can never use that data interchangeably. I can never figure out what happened. So great thing about NRM 1 is it lets me do that. Next stage, once I've got my concrete column, I need to do what I said before and start to build things under it. And I say, okay, well I've got some formwork, I've got some concrete, I've got some formwork, and I've got some rebar. And all of that is included in that column. And all of that has a price. So it's £200 per metre cube, and I'm sorry these are terrible, for concrete, £18 a metre squared for formwork. Once I've done all this, all these systems that we offer can then say, well, it's going to cost you £232 per linear metre for those columns. So if my columns are 2 metres high, I know that it's costing me £464 per column. So if someone turns around to me and says, Matt, we want to put 5 new columns on this project, I can go, £2,000. Quick as that. The next step is to, and I'll just sort of squash this down so we've lost the descriptions, is to say, okay, well under here, I might say I've got some labour, some plant and material, and it's all still sitting under this rebar. And I could say, okay, I can do 0.033 tonnes in an hour. So that means I've got 154 hours of labour, it's costing me £18 an hour, it's £2,700. And all of this just builds up to that cost. And the key here is that that rebar, no matter what happens, most estimators will always price that the same. But most estimators will always go bottom up and start again. Whereas we're saying, well no, just grab that, stick it under it, and then the next time, use it again. So, the key to this is a content plan. And this is an NRM1 content plan, and this is something that we encourage our clients to work with when they're working with designers. And what a content plan is, it is a statement from the designer of what is going to be inside that model. They haven't delivered the model yet, but they're telling you what's going to be in there. Because more often than not, they know roughly. It doesn't have to be correct, and we make sure everyone's aware that this is a living document, and it is not contractual. But what it allows us to do is start to price things theoretically before we receive the model. And that gets over this whole issue of people saying, well, I don't get the model till 4 weeks before my tender's due in, and how can I possibly work with BIM in construction industry? It doesn't work. So, let's say that's our content plan that we've got from a project. We've got some same columns, same beams, and I've thrown a few suspended slabs in there. And then I say, hang on a minute, I've built these beams before. I could either be from a past project, I could have built up a reference library, or I could go for the BCIS, and the BCIS are starting to move into this sort of stuff now. And under that beam, I've got my concrete, I've got my formwork, I've got my labour, I've got everything related to that beam, and I just go, okay, will you go over there? And I've just saved myself a lot of time doing that. So what I end up with on my project is something that looks like this in a data point of view to say, okay, I've got headers, I've got subheaders, I've got methods of construction, I've got resources, and then someone says to me, Matt, how much formwork have you got? And I say, that's how much formwork I've got. And then someone says, Matt, how much steel fixtures have you got? I say, that's how many steel fixtures I've got. And then someone says, Matt, how much does that beam cost? And I say, that's how much that beam costs. So I can all of a sudden spin this data out into as many different formalities as I want, and I haven't had to do any more work. So far, nothing I've showed you is any more work than anyone does at the moment, but it's just structuring it in a way that makes sense. And so now the next thing is tagging. So far I've talked wholly about cost. But what if those aspects of my reference library also included packages? They included embodied carbon, which if anyone works in civils is huge right now, and people spend way too much time trying to figure this out when it should be pretty simple. Activity codes, ledger codes, finance codes, Uniclass can be in there as well. And then you move on to NRM3, which is your life cycle management. You can put a maintenance schedule in, you can put replacement costs, you can put life cycle costs, you can put fees in there. And all this could be in that reference library that I just slotted under that bin. So automatically, not only do I know how much it costs, I know how long it's going to take me to make, I know what the embodied carbon is, and I'm not saying any of this is going to be 100%. I'm saying you're going to be 80, 90% of the way there, maybe. And then you can tweak whatever changes are specific to this project, but you're not starting from scratch every time. So, how do we do this? Because at the minute, I can't just go to a client and say, you should do this. There are so many barriers to getting this, and one thing that Ollie sort of mentioned is people. People need to be accepting that data is a part of the way we work now, and it should be encouraged. But I've split it into two halves, what the designers need to do and what the contractors need to do. So, designers need consistent element information. They need NRM1 codes in the model. And a lot of designers are resistant to this, but if we look at it pragmatically, the designer is the person who is best placed to do this, because they are the one putting the column there. They are the one dragging it from their sample library, so they might as well name it in a way that helps everyone on the project. We can work with the content plan, and then finally, efficient LODs, which I'm sure everyone has had a problem with at some point, where someone has modelled a stud wall with every stud, every bit of insulation, every nail, every whatever, and that's no good to anyone except maybe the guy who's buying nails. So what we're saying is, pare it back, have the discussion, and figure out who needs what information and when they need it. And then what does a contractor need to do? The contractor needs to use modern software. There are a lot of solutions out there which can help this, but we need to accept the fact that we need to work with our data rather than using spreadsheets and things like that to work around it. They need to maintain their data. In our opinion, they should be subtracting, not adding. So when I'm building up a project, I should take over everything that I think I might need. So let's say I'm building some pads. I should bring over dewatering, I should bring over breaking out any concrete in the ground. I should bring that over automatically, and then I should go through and delete the things that I don't need, rather than trying to add things in that I do need and potentially missing something. And then most importantly, we need this feedback loop. Because so far, everyone's estimating data that I have seen is based off of estimating data. And they're just reusing estimating data. But no one carries it through to site, finds out how much it actually cost them to build, puts it back in, and then says, okay, every time we make piles, it costs us 20% more than we thought it did. We don't get that feedback loop, and that is because our data is not well organized. So, what are the benefits? Consistent project delivery, simple cost summaries, so we can get the information that we need to the people that need it. We don't inundate people with information they don't need, and any old layman can come on the project who isn't even in construction, because a lot of the clients we work with, they don't work in construction, they might be a supermarket. They don't know how much formwork you need to build a supermarket. They want to know how much their supermarket is going to cost in a way that they understand it. Mitigation of disputes, faster and more reliable pre-construction, and I'll jump down to the bottom. This is the most important one for us. Construction is not an industry that's going to shrink. It can't, because of the nature of the global industry that is construction. It can't shrink because too many people would lose their jobs. So what we should be doing is building more for the same amount of money. We should build better things. We should build better infrastructure. We should build more interesting buildings. We shouldn't build shoebox schools, because we don't have to. So, second to last slide, because this wouldn't be a software demonstration if I didn't put a sales pitch in the end. What's the solution to this? We sell something called Vico Office. For us, it's great. We can preempt most of what I've showed you. Some of it is still pie in the sky stuff that I can't guarantee you could do. But we do have clients that are working towards automating as much of their takeoff, as much of their program, as much of their everything as they possibly can, so that they can preempt the designer, get the model in, and then bang, they've already got a rough process, they've already got a cost plan, they've already got labour allocations if they really want it. And then of course when they go to site, they know what the labourer is, what their subcontractor, who their subcontractor is, what the cost code associated with. So when we go to all these new systems with swiping cards, I don't have to do allocation sheets anymore. because I know this guy turned up, I know he's from that subcontractor, there's only one thing in my program that he could possibly be doing today, and it's got a cost code associated with it. So I don't have to do anything, it just happens. So last slide, other industries. Normally, I actually have come from an automotive and aerospace background. Normally people harp on about automotive and aerospace and how great they are. I think it's interesting to look to other industries and see how data affects your everyday life. If anyone has an Android phone or they have the Google app on their iPhone, there is something on Google Maps called the timeline. And you can go on there and Google logs every single thing you do and everywhere you go and how you get there. So I didn't ask for any of this, it just kind of happened one day when I went on this thing. The other day I came up to Birmingham to work on a project. It told me, you can't quite sit here, it told me how long I spent on the train, it told me how long I spent on a bus, it told me how far I walked, it told me whose office I went to and how long I was in there for, and it even told me how much my lunch cost because it's linked to my payment thing that comes through my email. This is what other people are doing with data, and yet we're doing almost nothing with it, and we're not letting it work for us. So I would encourage anyone with an Android phone to check out that website, and I'd welcome any questions.